I wanted to let the public know that public comment is next on the agenda for items that are not already on the agenda. So if you have a public comment on something that's not here on the agenda, there are two ways to do it. If you're connecting through Zoom, you can click the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, or you can send an email to princetoncomments@gmail.com. But we'll start with announcements, and we'll start with Council President Cohen. Any announcements this evening?
No announcements.
Ms. Fraga, any announcements?
I do. I have one that's a quick announcement and another that's a combination announcement and report, but I'll make it now. The first one, the announcement on behalf of Human Services, is to remind folks that the Summer Youth Employment Program the Human Services is taking application, and the deadline is this coming Friday, July 3rd. Information about the program, as well as a link for interested students to submit their application, uploaded and submitted online, is available through the Human Services website. The other one that's a combination of announcement and report is, you all heard that there was sometime last week, there was racist graffiti that was found on the Poe Road Bridge. And I'm sad to report that over the weekend, racist graffiti was again found, this time under the bridge off the towpath near Alexander Road. It is disgusting that someone would commit a hateful and racist act like this. There is no place in our community for this behavior and mindset, because this makes not one, but multiple racist threats that have been directed at members of our community. And an attack on some members of our community is an attack on all of us. We do not and will not tolerate racism in any form. It is despicable that anyone uses this language, which I won't repeat, or think that it is ever okay to do so. It amounts to hate and intimidation and does not conform to our principles of community. We assure our residents that our community stands with all who are targeted by hate speech and racist acts, and we will not tolerate this type of behavior. The Princeton Police Department is treating this incident as a bias intimidation crime. And if anyone has information regarding the incident, please contact the Princeton Police Department at 609-921-2100. Also, as part of my announcements, on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission, starting on July 1st, they will be hosting virtual office hours through the library, and it will be virtually. So the Civil Rights Commission will be hosting virtual office hours on July 1st and the 15th at 6 p.m., on July 9th and 23rd at 2 p.m. And we will be posting the information on how to access via Zoom. Also, the Civil Rights Commission has been planning community dialogues and forums, and there are going to be a series of forums directed with different topics. One topic of the forum will be eliminating exclusionary zoning ordinances. I'm not sure where that, I will ask for more detail from Civil Rights Commission. But the other one, Civilian Complaint and Review Board. And these are topics that have been suggested by the community. And the other one, that a topic of conversation is equitable state and local budgets. But I also know that one of the forums, the first one that I know that they plan to have will include our Chief of Police, a conversation with our Chief of Police, and we'll be facilitating a dialogue between the community and our police department. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilman Williamson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm happy to announce that the Princeton Recreation Board has decided to open Community Park Pool this summer. We're expected to open on July 13th. We plan to follow a 2-week by 2-week schedule, which means that we expect to evaluate how things are running for the prior 2 weeks as we decide what to do for the coming weeks. Considering that this requires a very short noticing time, we plan to have proper signage at the pool and also keep up-to-date information available via the municipal website. Just some other important points while I'm on the topic is we plan to follow an a la carte pay-as-you-go model. So folks will be expected to pay for services as they come to the pool. And the prices, of course, would also be published. Regarding our legal advisors has recommended that we provide it's going to be a 4-page waiver. So for attorneys, that's normal for us, but I know for some pool goers that may seem a little burdensome. Unfortunately, that's one of the prices we have to pay to operate within the COVID environment. And we'll be taking special measures to ensure that those who sign on behalf of minors are authorized to sign on behalf of a particular minor. We are now allowing non-Princeton residents who have been members in prior years to continue to use the pool, but unfortunately, because of the lower capacity, we are not allowing any new non-Princeton residents to get membership at this point. Of course, as we go from the 2-week schedule, that may be subject to change. Pool goers will have access to the shower facilities because that's not something that we're authorized to change, actually. And just wanted to commend the Recreation Board and and Ben, Evan Moorhead, and the rest of the staff at Recreation on having the courage actually to move forward. We know that some neighboring pool facilities are going to be closed. We consider it a public good, so we're willing to take whatever measures are necessary to have people have access to the pool while doing our best to avoid any future spread of COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Niedergang?
No announcements tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Councilwoman Sachs?
No announcements tonight.
And Councilwoman Fern-Lambros?
I have one announcement, and I'm very excited and very pleased to announce that we have the launch of the Princeton Small Business Resiliency Fund. So Princeton small businesses are due to get some relief from financial assistance from this fund. The fund has been created with $250,000 in seed money from Princeton University and an additional challenge, an additional 100,000 matching funds, so for donations. So this fund is designed to provide emergency assistance in the form of grants for independently owned small businesses located in Princeton, and in response, of course, to the COVID-19 crisis. The grant dollars are designed to cover a portion of expenses associated with reopening and adjusting to the requirements to conduct business in this new environment. The fund was several months in the making, and I'd like to thank, first of all, the mayor for her support in getting this fund put together. I'd also like to thank Princeton Mercer Chamber of Commerce President Peter Crowley and the Chamber Foundation Board of Directors. The foundation has engaged the Union County Economic Development Corporation to assist the committee in the evaluation and review of the grant applications. I especially would like to thank the university for their generous and sizable contribution, and I give special thanks to Kristen Applegate for all her support during the process. This was a long time coming and a lot of complication to put this together. And so I'm just really pleased tonight to announce this. I just want to also mention again that the grants will be available for retail storefront and restaurants located within our municipality, and they can be eligible for up to $5,000. So if the program becomes oversubscribed, we have some tiebreakers, such as preference will be given to women and minority-owned businesses. We'll give preferences for businesses using suppliers that are from other businesses that are located in Princeton, people who own businesses that are Princeton residents, and also those businesses that employ Princeton residents. But those are tiebreakers. We hope that we'll have enough funds for everyone who applies. We will have applications open on Wednesday, July 1st. We hope to reach out to all the retail storefronts and restaurants. We'll be working in conjunction with Councilwoman Fraga to reach some of the small independent businesses that may be having difficulty applying for these grants or other grants and loans. And if you want more information to either donate or apply for this grant program, it's you can find more information at princetonresiliencyfund.org. Thank you.
Michelle, would this be a good time because we don't know all the businesses
Right.
that are in our community. So if someone knows of a business, a very small business that it may not be in our radar, if they can please either let them know about it or reach out to us.
Please. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that report. And also thanks for your work in really making sure this came to fruition. There were many dead ends that we had to pick yourself up again and figure out how to make this work. So it was really a terrific outcome. So thank you. And also thank you for all the work you did on getting the outdoor dining set up in town. It looks every day, it looks better and better. So it's really great. For those of you who didn't hear, the governor made an announcement earlier today, along with the governor of New York, that plans for indoor dining are actually going to be put on hold. So that was set. There was going to be limited indoor dining allowed starting later this week. But because of health concerns from increasing cases in other parts of the country, they're going to be putting that off. So the outdoor spaces are even more important to keep our restaurants open. I just had a couple more announcements. First is I'll be holding virtual open office hours this Thursday morning, July 2nd from 8:30 to 10 a.m. And there's a Zoom link online at the municipal website, princetonnj.gov. And also municipal offices will be closed for the 4th of July holiday on Friday, July 3rd. And then finally, the Princeton Public Library is now accepting materials that people have had checked out since the shutdown first happened. And they will very soon be moving to contactless pickup of materials that you'll be able to order online. So library has a great website set up and you can track exactly when that date will be. Are there any staff announcements?
No, Mayor.
Yep, okay. Then we'll move on to public comment. I know there was a letter that came in that I will read. All right, let's see, there's a couple here. The first is from Patricia Saul. I read about the bias incident on the Princeton Police Facebook page. I would like to know, since it was racially motivated, what race was targeted. The community needs to know the gravity of the offense, especially for Princetonians who don't believe we have racism here in town. In these times, we all need to know what's happening so we can look out for the safety of those targeted. And those targeted need to know so they can be on high alert. The way that was written and the response was pretty non-alarming. However, we are in extraordinary times, so I think we need to do more than leave it on a Facebook post. Thanks for your consideration. The graffiti was anti-Black, and we can try to be more specific in future releases when it comes to that. I think the feeling was that we didn't want to print exactly what was in the graffiti to give a megaphone to who's ever spewing hateful material. But we appreciate that comment. Next is from Michael Floyd. That's, we'll get to Michael's comment because his applies to one of the ordinances. Sorry, I know, Mark, you sent me one.
There's one that applies to the ADU ordinance.
Okay, was there another public comment that was just generic?
I believe, I think it's Heidi, concerning the HAH overlay ordinance.
Okay, all right, well, all those are on the agenda.
Yes.
Was there anything else that was not already on the agenda?
No.
Yeah, okay. All right, then we will move on to reports. Were there any council reports that weren't covered already in announcements? Yeah, Mr. Cohen?
I just want to give two very quick reports. We had a good informational session about slow streets last Tuesday night. We had I think we had over 50 members of the public, and a lot of good questions, things for us to research further and consider fine-tuning how things will be implemented. So I think that was productive. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, this is really in an early stage, but have started conversations between the schools and the Senior Resource Center about ways that high school students can support seniors in this time when there's a lot of social isolation due to distancing requirements. So I actually learned that the PSRC used to have a program called Seniors for Seniors. It hasn't been operating recently, but they do have a program called Virtual Home Friends. And there's a lot of interest, and the library is getting involved as well, Kim Dorman, to see if we can put a program in place, at least for the summer and perhaps going into the fall, where some of our high schoolers will be doing outreach virtually to folks who are shut in their homes. So.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other reports? Okay. I think that actually this, the comment from Heidi Fichtenbaum, I don't think pertains to any of the ordinances that are on the agenda tonight. So I'm going to go back and read her comment as part of the public comment. So this is from Heidi Fichtenbaum. Questions and comments. There are 7 here, so I'm going to read all of them. Number 1, affordable housing overlay zone 1, 2, and 3 have impervious cover of 90%, 80%, and 70% respectively. Is the existing impervious cover in these locations? Maybe what is the existing impervious cover in these locations? I don't know if anybody knows that answer off the top of their head, or if this is something that will carry over to the meeting of the 13th and make sure we're able to answer at that point. Does somebody know the answer to that?
Staff, take a look because I'm not sure anyone knows off the top of their head.
Okay, all right. So we'll be sure to cover that when it comes up for public hearing on the 13th.
Yes.
In the affordable housing ordinances, some indicate bike parking and some do not. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I want to comment. I'm not sure that there's required bike parking in any of the ordinances. There is stipulation that bike parking that's provided should be outdoor bike parking that's provided should be covered. And I just want to mention that I believe Trishka is actually working on a bike parking ordinance that should kick in before any of these projects come for site plan review. So I just want to make people aware. I mean, this was on council's goals for this year, and it's a high priority because of all the new development we'll be having. So I just want to assure people that that's on our radar and will be put in place shortly.
Okay, and there's a second, number 3 is another bike parking question, in the affordable housing ordinances, some indicate bike parking, but do not indicate a minimum amount. Why is this not given when it is given for cars?
And the answer is it will be given before they're developed.
Okay.
That'll be part of that bike parking ordinance.
Number 4, some affordable housing ordinances indicate parking may not be between the street and the building, and some do not. Why is this not universal? I don't know if I should read through all of these or if people want to respond as I read them. Why don't I read through all of them and then we can go back if anybody has any comments, or if not, we can hold these to answer on the 13th. Number 5 is none of the affordable housing ordinance require EV parking. Why? Number 6, none of the affordable housing ordinances address the affordability of on-site amenities. This is a problem for Avalon Bay on Witherspoon, where amenities such as parking, pool, package delivery are all extra charges and reduce affordability significantly. And number 7, the affordable housing on the Franklin lot was originally set at 80 units. Recently, there has been discussion of 160 or more units on the site. I understand the idea is to have mixed income to better integrate the development and to allow for other development costs such as underground parking and a highly energy efficient net zero development. I think there is a balance to be struck on the density of the site to allow the development to provide a transition from adjacent single family structures to a higher density. If the ordinance contains a maximum number of units, it will guarantee that number will be built. Could this location be the site of 60 affordable and 60 market rate units for a total of 120 units, 40 units per acre, with the balance of the other 20 units built on another identified affordable site that is part of the plan? And I would say for that last question, that ordinance has not yet been introduced and it's not on the agenda for tonight. So that's not going to be coming before council till later next month. And yes, Mr. Cohen.
I actually wanted to go back and address a couple of the other questions. I think in terms of the EV charging, again, very much like the bike parking, this is something that we have to implement townwide. If we insert it into affordable housing ordinances, then we're doing something that's cost generative, that is applying specifically to a project that cannot have cost generative requirements on it. So I think, it's something that we need to be working on as a council to implement community-wide rather than in these particular ordinances. And I think the answer to why the parking is not allowed to be between the building and the street on some lots and not on others is that I think, and I'm going to have to go back and check this, but I think we're using other types of controls in some areas. So for instance, in some areas we have a maximum front yard setback of say 30 feet, which would essentially not allow the parking to be in front of the building. And so I think you need to look at the parking location requirements in conjunction with other requirements like the setbacks to really get a full picture of how we're trying to manage those things.
Okay, thank you. Was there anybody else who wanted to comment on any of those questions? All right, the ones that we weren't able to answer tonight we'll make sure to address on the 13th. Now I think I don't see any more public comments, so we're going to move to our ordinance public hearings for this evening. The first one is ordinance 2020-15, an ordinance amending or repealing or replacing certain sections as specified below of the Borough of Princeton Code and the Code of the Township of Princeton to address the requirements of the Fair Housing Act and the Uniform Housing Affordability Controls, UHAC, regarding compliance with the municipality's affordable housing obligations. And before we open up the public hearing for this ordinance, I wanted to see first if Michael Sullivan, if you had any comments you wanted to make, or if there were any questions or comments from council.
I don't have any comments to make on this ordinance. It's the affordable housing ordinance broadly. Nothing to add to it right now, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay. Ms. Niedergang, do you want to start, and then Mr. Cohen?
Actually, just a quick request for information. We know who Michael Sullivan is and what he's doing here, but I don't know if members of the public know. So Michael, maybe you can just say what your role in this is for the benefit of the public.
I apologize. I'm Michael Sullivan. I'm a principal with Clark Caton Hints in Trenton, New Jersey. We're a planning, architecture, and landscape architecture firm, and we've been hired to assist the municipality in achieving compliance in accordance with the fairness hearing and settlement for the affordable housing plan.
Thank you. Thanks, Eve, too. That was a good catch. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, so this ordinance was referred to the planning board for review and consideration of whether it was consistent with the master plan. I think there were a few comments, and there was a report that was supposed to be referred back to council with questions or concerns and some further research that was going to be done. I don't know what the status of that is, and I'm actually going to ask Michael Laplace because I know he was at the planning board meeting.
Yes, we did do a referral report back to the council.
Are there any particular items you think the council should know about? And I think one of the things in particular, there's been some chatter going around about minimum bedroom sizes and stuff like that. And
Right, and we've done some follow-up research on that, looking at HUD standards and some other standards. So that was the item that I recalled being brought up, and there was some extensive discussion of it. I can't remember if there was, I don't think there were any other major issues that were raised. We spent a lot of time on unit size,
right.
as compared to bedroom size.
Mia, do you remember there was one other thing that was sort of, let's find out more?
Well, so what have we decided about the bedroom size? I mean, I feel like we haven't reached a conclusion. I know Maureen sent us, she basically said it wasn't relevant.
Yeah, I'll summarize some of the back and forth emails that we've had, which essentially, because apparently there are some HUD standards about bedroom size, but because none of these projects are HUD funded, those requirements don't apply. I think that UHAC, which is the Uniform Housing, I never remember what the acronym is, but
Affordability controls.
thank you. Doesn't have this stuff in it. And according to our settlement with Fair Share, we're really supposed to be just following the UHAC guidelines in this ordinance. So I think where we are is that we don't have room size controls in the ordinance, even though they used to be in the ordinance. So I guess I just wanted to flag that as an issue, let people know that we're aware of it. But that the research that we've done hasn't indicated to us that they should be inserted into this ordinance. Is that a fair representation, Michael and Mia? Do you feel
Yes.
it reflects? Okay.
Are there any other comments before we open up the public hearing or questions? Okay, so we're going to start the public hearing with an email we received from Michael Floyd. My comments pertain to Ordinance 2020-15, Section 10B 355, number 9. The affirmative marketing strategies set forth in the proposed ordinance appear to me to be old and outdated. I am not sure, but it may be almost boilerplate language from 15 years ago. The marketing strategies in the draft ordinance can be greatly improved, and strategies should be updated and expanded to utilize individuals and organizations that are truly active and present and present better capabilities to reach those Mercer County target groups that are least likely to apply. A few organizations that I recommend be added: Change Church, Reverend Darius Daniels, National Pan-Hellenic Council of Mercer County, Capital Area City Black Caucus, African Cultural Collaboration of Mercer County. There are additional organizations and also individuals that can better further the intent of this section. I can discuss this matter with anyone of your choosing. Is that something that we can have a list that is kept by the Affordable Housing Department? I'm just wondering if there's a way to create. I mean, it seems like it's a useful comment to have a local, more specified list. I don't know if we want to ordinance that list or if we ordinance the existence of that list and have it live with our Affordable Housing Department.
Mayor, I think you have the idea would be to just make sure that list is created on an annual basis through the Affordable Housing Committee and updated regularly would probably be the right way to do it.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll follow up with Michael and connect him with Maureen and see what we can do about getting the list integrated.
I have a question on that also. If we pass this ordinance, if we do want to update the list with the suggestions from Michael, how do we go about that? Would the ordinance need to be amended at a certain point, or can we just add those extra places to send the information or mark it through?
Yeah, I think that if we can have language, and I don't know if somebody can come up with some language on the fly tonight that we can amend the ordinance. I don't think this is considered a substantive change, but that the ordinance would reference a list or reference the existence of a list. Because then we can, if the Affordable Housing Board decides to change the list, then we can come back and make those changes, Mayor. So I think we're yeah, I don't think the list itself is not in the ordinance. It's just the existence of the list is in the ordinance. Okay, I thought when I read it, it did mention certain specific places.
It does at this point, but I think the mayor's right. You could do an amendment that would just also include that there would be a list that would be maintained on an annual basis and updated, and maybe you make it provided to council on an annual basis.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to put on the record that I like Mike Floyd's ideas, and I would like to see if we can get those incorporated. So I guess that answers the question. Thanks,
yeah, thank you. If you're watching, Michael, thank you for that suggestion. Ms. Niedergang?
Did you want specific language, or do you have that?
Yeah, I think if, I don't know if Michael Sullivan, you had something, or if somebody had suggested language.
What I would suggest is that at the end of the section that deals with the existing groups that are mentioned in here, which have been around for a long time, that there, in addition, that it would have the annually updated municipal list that is, I'm thinking on the fly here, but would be maintained by the municipal housing liaison.
And let me ask another question. When you say annually updated, what if we wanted to update it like within a year? How does that work?
Well, I think you can update that list to expand it at any point you'd like. The idea is that we would want to not have to go revisit this ordinance every time you did that.
I agree. I just didn't know if annually preempts us from making a change within 6 months, for example, of making another change. Okay.
I would say I would just say the list maintained by the municipal housing liaison. Start it that way. Good. That way you're not tying yourself to any sort of time frame, either to make sure that you update it, but it should become a part of the operation in terms of just making sure.
We can just add after to the following entities, just add, and others that may be added from a list the municipality keeps on an
Right.
ongoing basis.
Right.
Something roughly, Dwayne or Michael defer to the legal, but something like that, just, a
Right.
few words that just indicate that we'll definitely do these, but we're open to other additions. And I also want to echo Dwayne's point that Michael Floyd, thank you, great suggestion.
Yeah, we
Commissioner,
don't
did you
need
also
to nail down the exact wording of
Okay.
that. I think it's clear what the intent is, and then we can
Okay.
wordsmith it after the fact.
Okay, terrific.
Thanks, Trishka. Yeah, great.
Are there any other comments or suggestions on this ordinance? I see something in the Q&A. Oh, Michael's actually making a suggestion to say for the language, or such groups and individuals as determined by the municipal housing liaison. Okay. Any other comments from the public before we close the public hearing on this ordinance? Checking with Mr. DeShield if any other emails have come in the interim.
No, Mayor.
Okay. And I don't see any other comments coming in, so I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to council and ask if there are any further discussion, and if not, is there a motion to approve? Oh, do we need to make it say that it's, do we need to make that motion, Trishka, with reference to that change or not?
Yeah, I would just move the adoption with the amendment discussed
Okay,
on the record. That
Okay.
should be sufficient.
okay. Is there a motion to approve with the amendment discussed? Moved by Ms. Fraga. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Williamson. Any final discussion? All right, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrone Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
All right, the ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to ordinance 2020-16, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton making accessory dwelling units a permitted accessory use in all residential zones and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And before we open up the public hearing, wanted to see if there are any comments from council on this ordinance. Any comments? Yep. Councilwoman Niedergang?
I just read over the memo from the Princeton Progressive Action Group, and their third comment, which I'm sure you'll be reading, this really spoke to something that had concerned me and that I spoke to Councilman Cohen about, which is we're doing this, it seems, under and trying to hide what we're doing at the same time, or at least that's how it felt to me reading the ordinance over. And I think this is a really great step that we're taking. And I don't think we need to disguise it or hide it. I think, towns change and evolve, as will Princeton, and maybe an area that has been single family homes for a long time will in 10 or 15 years not be. And I think that's okay. So their last concern that they brought up really hit a nerve for me in terms of how I felt reading the ordinance. So I'd like us to be proud of this and not kind of feel that we need to hide what we're doing, which again is how it felt a little bit to me. So thanks.
Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I'd just like to respond that this language was developed by the planners who drafted the ordinance, which is LRK, Jim Constantine's group. I think that it's a nod to preserving neighborhood character, which is something that we have expressed support for as a council in the past, and which I continue to support. I think that some of the rules also are intended to actually shield neighbors from intrusion. It's not just a visual thing, but it's audible. It's disruption of their lifestyle. So I know that it's somewhat limiting. I feel like it's not unduly limiting. And I think there are good reasons for that set of restrictions. So I would tend to disagree with Councilwoman Niedergang, respectfully.
Councilwoman Perlambros?
I just wanted to go back because Councilwoman Niedergang made a good point, but I'm not sure people watching or know what she was referring to exactly. So because we didn't really read what it said. So
yeah, that's going to be in the public comment when we open up public comment. Yeah, so
okay,
that'll,
that's fine. Okay.
yeah,
Right.
and then we might have further discussion too.
Okay, I just want to make sure people knew what she was referring to because it's an important point, and Councilman Cohen and I had the same discussion, and so I understand the logic behind it, but it is a good point. So thank you.
And then before we open up the public comment, if there's someone who can just explain to everybody who's watching what we mean when we say an accessory dwelling unit, I think that will just make sure that we're all talking about the same thing when we open up the public comment.
David.
David, go ahead. You're the.
I feel like everyone's looking at me. It's hard to tell in a Zoom meeting, but so an accessory dwelling unit is essentially an additional dwelling that can be built in a single family zone. So even though single family zones are created to only allow single family dwellings, accessory dwellings are intended to allow a range of different types of use in support, accessory to the main dwelling. So one common use is for seniors to build perhaps an accessory dwelling unit that might be on one floor. They may own a two-story house, but they might want to age in place and they can't use the second floor. So they might build an accessory dwelling that was all on one floor, more accessible, and then rent out the primary dwelling as a way to continue to get help with paying property taxes and such. As a group, the council is really viewing these as a nice gesture, a nice step towards providing some missing middle housing in the sense that these are going to be smaller dwelling units than the primary dwellings. They are limited in size and they're limited in the number of habitable rooms that can be part of the unit. And the goal there is to make them a little bit more affordable, even though they're not affordable with a capital A. They're not subsidized, but they're units they can be great for, say, a single parent who has a child or even two who have been in the Princeton schools. They're divorced. They don't want to pull their kids out of the schools. So this can create an opportunity for them to stay in town. So those are the kinds of things that these units are really good for.
Okay, great, thank you. And then one final thing before we open up the public hearing is, can we also have the planning board report on this ordinance?
Yeah, the planning board reviewed the ordinance at its last meeting and felt that it was a pretty innovative and appropriate way to provide some infill housing in our established neighborhoods. It is certainly consistent with the master plan in terms of looking at ways to provide affordable housing and diverse housing opportunities in Princeton. So the board was unanimous in its endorsement.
Okay, great, thank you. If there's no further comments or questions, then I'm going to open up the public hearing. And we will start with,
Mia has something.
Hold on.
sorry,
Michael, wasn't there was a recommendation that came along with this? We changed something at the planning board. Was that
I can, yeah, I can jump in on that. There were actually 3 changes that were made, although a couple are really housekeeping. And all 3 of those changes that were recommended by the planning board, there's actually a redlined copy of the ordinance that's posted with the online materials that shows those changes. So the public can actually see them. What I would characterize as the substantive one, but it's not so substantial that it would warrant reintroduction. There was previously a requirement in the ordinance, the version that was introduced, that says that the lot must meet the minimum lot area specified for the zoning district in which it's located in order for an ADU to be constructed. And at the planning board's recommendation, that has been taken out. That would be the first proposed amendment. The other 2, which really are, I would characterize more as housekeeping, is adding language that would go into the code itself, that if there's a conflict between any of the ADU provisions and provisions elsewhere in the ordinance, the ADU provisions would prevail. And then we've added on to the grandfathering provision, so that it makes it clear that ADUs can be built on undersized lots as long as all of the other bulk requirements are satisfied. And then there was one additional change that after the ordinance was introduced, your zoning officer picked up on a conflict with an existing provision in the borough code. So that conflict's also being resolved.
Great, thanks, Trishka. I just want to make sure that was included.
Yes, thank you.
okay, thanks. If there's nothing else at this point, then I'm going to open up the public hearing. And we're going to start with the email we received from the members of the Princeton Progressive Action Group. We have received ordinance number 2020-16 as introduced at the June 15th council meeting and the modifications recommended by the planning board, and applaud your effort to create desperately needed missing middle housing in this time of health, economic, and racial justice crises. We want to bring your attention that although most of the ordinance is an improvement over the current borough and township secondary unit and flat ordinances, the proposed zoning still imposes unnecessary obstacles to creating accessory dwellings. We hope you will consider the below suggestions to make the ordinance even more successful. There are 4 very positive elements in the new ordinance that we applaud and would like to see maintained as they are in any modified ordinance. Number 1, it reduces the parking requirement for the studio and 1-bedroom accessory dwelling units. Number 2, it includes a bonus for providing wheelchair accessible units. Number 3, it eliminates the owner occupancy requirement. Number 4, assuming the planning board recommendations are accepted, the ordinance will increase the potential for ADUs in the central areas of town where they are most needed. Below are 3 aspects of the ordinance that could be improved with suggested modifications. Number 1, the current township flat ordinance contains a sliding scale for the unit size, allowing smaller homes to have proportionately larger flats. The borough secondary dwelling unit ordinance has no limit on the size of a secondary unit. The new ordinance limits accessory units to 800 square feet unless the principal house on the lot is greater than 3,200 square feet, thus effectively incentivizing increasing the bulk of principal structures if an ADU of greater than 800 square feet is required. We suggest applying the former township rule to determine the allowable ADU size. Number 2, although the current borough ordinance allows for only 2 habitable rooms for secondary dwelling units, the current township flat ordinance has no limit on the number of habitable rooms. Given that the overall bulk is controlled by other means, the proposed requirements for a maximum of 3 habitable rooms, 2 bedrooms and a living room, means that a large majority of accessory units will be studios and one-bedroom homes with only limited numbers of 2 bedrooms and no 3-bedroom or larger. Lot size limitations and bulk requirements will prevent most properties from creating 3-bedroom or larger ADUs, but we see no reason to prevent them on those properties that could accommodate them. We recommend removing this limit altogether as it is superfluous and unnecessary. Number 3, the additional regulations controlling the locations of entrances, balconies, and decks appear to be included for the purpose of disguising the accessory unit. These regulations unfortunately also limit flexibility when creating ADUs within existing structures, which may inadvertently encourage teardowns. We suggest that the need for these regulations be reconsidered. Thank you for your consideration of these suggestions. All right. I guess, yeah, Mr. Cohen, go ahead. And then I want to make sure we're still in the public hearing phase, but go
For
ahead.
sure. Actually, I just wanted to raise a point of information. I am pretty sure that the borough's secondary dwelling ordinance does have a size limit. The letter said that there is no size limit on borough secondary ordinances. I'm actually trying to check this while the meeting is ongoing, so I'll get back to you on it. But I wanted to raise that as an issue because I just think factually that was not correct.
Okay, thank you for that. And Mr. DeShield, are there any other emails that came in for 2020-16?
There are not.
No, okay. And I'm checking the Q&A. Michael Floyd has put in a comment regarding accessory apartments. If you take out the minimum lot size, what controls, I guess, what are the controls? Which bulk restrictions apply? And he also makes the comment, missing middle will be out of reach for most.
It's the same bulk restrictions as for the house that's on the lot, right, Trishka?
Well, so in terms, if I understood the question correctly, this is dealing with the grandfathering. So the other types of bulk restrictions that you would get would be limits on height, setback requirements. All of those would continue to apply. You would just still be allowed to have an ADU even if your lot was undersized, because as we know, there are a number of neighborhoods in town where really a lot of the properties in the given zone are actually undersized for the zone and don't meet the lot area requirements. So that's what that's trying to get at, but all of the zones setback requirements and height limits would continue to apply.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes, I have a question because this has come up a lot, especially whether it's housing that's affordable or in this case, trying to address the need for the middle housing needs. And from what I understand, and I guess I'm asking our legal counsel here, is that locally we cannot enforce any limits on the rent that can be charged? Or is there anything that we can do in that area? Because it's true that it doesn't matter how much is being built, if aside from affordable housing, if we cannot limit the rent that can be charged, it's still going to be out of reach for many individuals, even those that are considered middle income.
Can I just ask that you hold that question for 1 minute, and I just want to be able to close out the public hearing, and then we'll come back to questions from council. So I just want to double check again that when we've been talking, Mr. DeShield, no other emails have come in. Mark?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
My computer up again. No more emails.
No more emails. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing then on this ordinance, and then we'll bring it back to Ms. Fraga's question about whether we can impose any sort of rent restrictions.
That's a much bigger question. I'd have to go and do the research. I know there's lots of rules with respect to rent leveling and all the rest. And I'd have to, it's not something I can answer off the top of my head tonight.
And while you're doing that, could you please also, if not setting limits, at the very least, setting stabilizing rents at the percent?
Yeah, yeah. So we'll definitely look into that
Okay,
and get back to you.
thank you.
I need to close this window so I can see. Yes, Ms. Niedergang. I saw
So I
your
just
hand,
wanna-
but not your face.
I just want to follow up on what Councilwoman Fraga said. If Trishka is looking into this issue, which is if you cannot either do some kind of rent control or rent stabilization, or you cannot limit rents in that way, I wonder if there's any way to have some kind of other program where if somebody maintains a, kind of middle income rent, that we can provide some incentive for that, that would not strictly be rent, but if you do this, we will. And I don't know what the gift, what the quid pro quo would be, but I wonder if that's also something that might be done, because that might be more allowable than imposing a limit. So just to our legal counsel, if you're looking into that, maybe add that to, and can I also respond to what Councilman Cohen said before, respectfully? So yeah, I understand. I think neighborhood character can be kind of a two-edged sword, and in general, I support it, and I think it is the way I like it is that it can be used to keep out McMansions, but it can also be used in an exclusionary way to keep out people of lower socioeconomic means, and to ensure, as long as the house that I live in can only be one unit, it's going to be at a certain price. But if it can be divided up into more than one unit, then that brings costs down. And I just I don't know, I know this is maybe goes beyond this ordinance, but I just see those movements towards kind of, as I said, disguising what we're doing, or not being willing to say that we need to do away with some of this zoning in order to ensure that people of different economic means are able to stay in the town, and that it doesn't just become affordable housing and wealthy people. So that again, that particular part of the PPAG letter just really struck home for me. And as Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros said that she had the same impression. So I want to make sure we don't forget about that issue going forward.
Mr. Cohen and then Ms. Perrin-Lambros.
So I was not able to complete an exhaustive search of the zoning ordinance in the former borough, but there is a size limit of 2 habitable rooms on secondary residences in the borough. I could not find a square foot limit, but we've actually made it more liberal in the new ADU ordinance because it's 3 habitable rooms instead of 2. So I just wanted to give that piece of insight in regard to the questions that were raised.
Thank you. And Ms. Perrin-Lambros?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back and address some of these concerns that PPAG had brought up, going backwards from number 3 again. I guess I had the same concern that Councilwoman Niedergang had, and I guess I feel that this is a step in the right direction. This isn't the end all salvo of everything we need to accomplish and want to accomplish. But so I understand Mr. Cohen's, concern about neighborhood character. So I also, have shared the same concern. I also wanted to mention on number 2, we went back and forth on the number of bedrooms, and we settled on the number of habitable rooms as being less intrusive and invasive in terms of how people were going to actually utilize the space of their 800 square feet. And again, we had quite a few conversations about this, although I don't see it as superfluous, but it is difficult to actually, I think, zone for the number of bedrooms. So we did get rid of the bedrooms and we went with habitable rooms. If I recall our conversations, and I see Mr. Cohen nodding. So that was how we concluded that. And then we had really kind of settled on 800 square feet as a maximum. And we also went back and forth on that and coming up with the idea of that as a maximum unless it's a larger property, and then going to 25%. Again, addressing the concerns that this could be something community-wide. I don't see why we wouldn't, limit that number to the 25%. And again, I don't see this ADU ordinance as the last phase of this, but really as a beginning to trying to find those affordable, or, with a small a, more affordability and more inventory in town for more socioeconomic diversity in town. So I just wanted to make those comments.
Thanks, Ms. Lambros. Next is Council President Cohen and then Councilwoman Sachs.
Yeah, and I did want to say two things. More specifically to Ms. Perrin-Lambros's point, some of the other things that we're looking at doing following up on this is identifying neighborhoods where duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes would be suitable. So, it's not like only the neighborhoods where we currently have those, that's the only place where they'll be allowed. We do want to look into where those would be suitable. And I think similarly, we've talked about perhaps looking at the western section, some of those grand old houses and the possibility of condominiumizing them, creating multiple dwelling units, and also preserving some of our great old housing stock by doing that kind of adaptive reuse. So I just wanted to be really specific about some of the further interventions that we see coming down the road. And then the last thing I wanted to say, and Ms. Cecil can slap me down if I'm not allowed to say this. I know I'm not allowed to say it in regard to affordable housing, but I think that the idea of limiting the number of habitable rooms is something that we looked at as a way to not get a flood of additional school kids coming into town as a result. So I think that was part of our planning approach, was if we limit the number of habitable rooms, we're going to limit the size of families for whom these will be viable, and it'll help out the schools a little bit in managing their growth. Did I do wrong by saying?
I'll be careful with that one.
Ms. Sachs, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just actually gonna, I was planning to say the same thing that David said, and since he wasn't in trouble, he's not in trouble yet. Just to bring a reality check here, I understand the impetus to want to create all sorts of 2 and 3 and 4 bedroom and whatever, but I think we need to remain cognizant of the fact that our schools right now are filled to overflowing, and we recently had a referendum that didn't pass, and there does not seem to be the political will at the moment in the town to expand our schools. And so it would be very irresponsible of the municipality to create a situation in which there could be a tremendous influx of children and no capacity to educate them appropriately. And so if there is interest in the town, and for the people who are interested in creating many additional units with many bedrooms, then we need to think about what we're going to do in terms of investing in our schools, and whether there is, you can't just bring children in and not provide opportunities for them to be educated. So I just want to urge everyone to understand that, and to think about the big picture. And I love the idea, and I think we need to work on a solution, but you can't plan without thinking about the schools. So
Thank you.
If I may add, may I add something to that, Mayor?
Yes, please.
I think Councilwoman Sachs is correct that we do have to think about the impact on the schools, but we also want to be careful that we don't cross the line into appearing to be anti-family. And as we talk about creating more housing units, that we don't, because I'm sure at a certain point we would, and I think Tish can back me up on this, we're going to run afoul of the law if we do that. But it is certainly wise for us to think about the impact, to consider the impact on our schools, and to make sure that when we do our planning for housing, that we think of it in a very comprehensive sense, so we can continue to have the excellent school system we have. But we don't want to cross that line to appear that we're being anti-family in our considerations.
And I might put it a different way too. Sorry, Ms. Axer, just get in a word. It's, I think one of the goals in the master plan is to have a diversity of housing stock. And Princeton has a lot of single family homes for families. And what we don't have are a lot of smaller 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom. And I think that's what we often hear, that people want to be able to downsize, or that I think there's this desire for there to be more young people in town, and we're not going to be able to sort of attract different groups of people who maybe don't need a big single family home if all we're doing is building 3- and 4-bedroom, more 3- and 4-bedroom housing. So I think that's part of the motivation here too. I did want to, there were a couple comments that came in, and even though we've closed the public hearing, I want to be a little flexible since the technology's challenging, takes a while to type. So one was another comment from Michael Floyd, and I want to elaborate on his point in a second, but he's saying property values, future sale price will go even higher, question mark. And then Kip Cherry says, this comment may be too late, but Leticia's question really gets to the heart of the matter and should be expanded to condominiums. A good example that is very typical of higher density construction in a primarily single family neighborhood is the 2 Hillier units on Quarry, which were sold at a price point well beyond middle income people. And I think those two comments in some ways are similar. And I think it's, I think in terms of the goals of council in passing this ordinance, I think we just want to be cognizant that the price of housing and the value of housing is really hard to get at through zoning. I think we do our best because that's the tool that we have. But just because we're allowing somebody to create an ADU doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be inexpensive. I remember reading a story in Palo Alto where they had a detached garage that they were leasing out or selling, and there's actually a fire there. So it was a burned garage, and it sold for $1.5 million. So it's just because it's small does not necessarily mean it's going to be inexpensive. The other thing that I think is hard to predict what the impact of this is going to be is if you're in a single family home now and you're not allowed to have an accessory dwelling unit, which I think is not too many places in town right now, and that if suddenly you are allowed to build an accessory dwelling unit, does that impact the value of your home? And especially, does that impact the value of your neighbors' homes? And I think that's what Michael's getting at. If suddenly most of the people in your neighborhood take advantage of this and you don't, does that suddenly increase your own property value and your own corresponding property taxes? And I think the answer to that is it's really hard for us to predict that at this point. And both the former township and former borough have had these laws on the books for a while. And, you know, I think some people take advantage of it. And I don't think we have a good sense of how many people are going to take advantage of this. And I think the goal is really having more diverse housing stock. That's something that definitively we can say that this ordinance will accomplish. The things about the costs of the housing, I think, are wishes, but this is a zoning ordinance. It's not, and you know, to Ms. Fraga's point, it's like there's no rent control put into this, so we just don't know. Are there any other comments or questions on this? Ms. Niedergang?
So it sounds like of the 3 points made in the, have we addressed all 3 of the points made in the PPAG comment?
Let's see, so point 1.
I think we've addressed the 2 habitable rooms.
The first one was the size, which I think Council President Cohen addressed.
Right.
And then the third one, what I was hearing was that there was interest in that comment, and maybe as a sort of wait and see, and if there's going to be additional work on this, that will be something that's considered for the next round, if I heard the comments correctly on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this? Okay. Then is, I think this needs to be moved with the amendments recommended by the planning board. Is there a motion to approve this ordinance with the changes recommended by the planning board? Mr. Cohen?
So moved.
And seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any last final words? I will just say this is something we've been talking about for a while. And it both helps to harmonize our existing ordinances, which is terrific. And I think it also is a move towards, you know, expanding the types of housing we have, and hopefully more missing middle housing. So thank you to Council President Cohen and Ms. Sachs and everybody else who worked on this.
Michelle worked.
And yeah, Ms. Pearl-Lambros, thank you. And to our
And
staff also.
I'll just throw in that despite my comments urging us to move further, that I really think this is a great step in the right direction. I just want to continue to build on it. So thank you to all who worked on it.
Great. So Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
The ordinance passes unanimously. And next we come to our ordinance introductions for this evening. There are 2 ordinances being introduced. The first one is Ordinance 2020, an ordinance to amend Chapter 10B of the Princeton Code entitled Land Use and the Princeton Zoning Map to create a AH4 affordable housing for residential district and the regulations associated thereto in the municipality of Princeton. And this ordinance pertains to Princeton Community Village and allows for some additional units to be built there. Mr. Cohen, did you want to say something?
I just want to make sure that we have the right version of this ordinance that we're actually discussing and voting on. I'm gonna, oops. Actually, maybe Michael Sullivan has easier access to it. I thought I had it up on my computer, but Michael, can you give us the name of the draft document that is the one basically with PCH's comments all incorporated.
The draft, so the draft that's dated today, it does not have a B after it, is the draft that incorporated all of the comments from Ed Truselli with respect to this.
And then can I just ask, Ms. Williams, is that the draft that's currently online, part of the packet?
That was the one that I got on Friday. I didn't get anything today.
But there was a new packet that was came out this afternoon.
Yes, that.
Yes,
was
but that didn't have that didn't have 4 on it.
Didn't have the new
Okay.
draft.
So
Didn't
these,
have a
these were
draft.
these were the documents that David sent out. Those were the up-to-date ones.
The ones that were up to date, I sent out a package,
Oh, Mark sent out, right.
AH5
Mhm.
plus the S, and I'm not the numbers, the S ordinance. We did not, there wasn't a additional, if there's some additional amendments, and I'm missing if there's something for AH4.
Okay, I actually, I feel like, are we able, Dolores, are we able to put something up on the website at this point if we took a short recess? Are you able to do that from where you are?
Is it going to be forward to me to do that? I don't have anything, so
Right, no, if something's forwarded to you, can you get it up on the website?
I will
I'm
try.
sending it right now.
I will try.
Okay.
All I can do.
Okay. I think while that's happening,
I-
it,
Can we go to the next one?
well, no, I was gonna say we should have Michael Sullivan walk us through what is in the ordinance. And the public can follow along and council can follow along. And then this ordinance is going to come back for the public hearing on July 13th. But I want to make sure that there's no confusion on the part of council as to what's being introduced tonight and what we're voting on. So if, either we can take a 5-minute recess so that we're all looking at the same document, which maybe is the best thing to do. I just am loath for everybody to log off of Zoom because then we lose everybody.
So what is the name of the document? Because I have 2020, 21 and 2020, 22, but I realize I don't have 2020, 20, which is
The name of the document is 200629_AH-4_draft.pdf.
I don't see a document with that name among the documents that Mark sent out earlier.
Because we
Today?
didn't get it, Eve. So it's not there. So that's the one that
Oh.
David's sending to us now for me to do.
Okay.
I will
think
send
that
it,
might be the
I'll send it to all the other members of council as well.
Yeah, please do. Thanks.
Is this is the PCH ordinance?
Yes.
So, I mean, the changes are really minor from what everybody read. I mean, David, we could, or Michael could just go through them. There's just a few very minor changes.
I agree.
Okay, well, let's do that. And then meanwhile, Ms. Williams, just let us know if you've gotten it, and you can just you can just send me a chat actually once it's been uploaded, and I can let people know that it's up online. But in the meantime, if Mr. Sullivan, you can walk us through the changes.
Bear with me for just a second because I have the version I thought was being adopted tonight. I got to pull up the version of the 20. There's a version that was dated the 25th.
Okay. While you're doing that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's happening just overall with affordable housing. So you'll notice this was a special meeting devoted to affordable housing. There's a few other things on the agenda tonight. If these two ordinances are introduced tonight, that will be most all of the affordable housing ordinances will either have been approved or introduced. I think there's just one more coming
Right.
on the 13th. You'll notice if these two are introduced tonight, they both have public hearings on the 13th, and the three ordinances we had at our last meeting, the public hearing for those will also be on July 13th. So July 13th is going to be another meeting where the bulk of it will be devoted to affordable housing. And at the conclusion of that meeting, we will have approved, most likely we'll have approved most all of the ordinances that will be taking into court the next month as part of our compliance hearing. Are you ready?
Yes, I think I
Okay,
can
good.
get
Yeah.
through it. I have it up. I can go through it. So hopefully
Okay.
this isn't too clunky.
good.
The first change is that although the settlement called for 24 dwelling units to be provided, the proposal really is to 25. We had kept it consistent with the settlement agreement. We're changing it to 25 as the minimum, and we will change that. That should be changed throughout the ordinance. It's mostly mentioned in the section 4, where there are mentions of how many dwelling units are 24. That's one change. When we get down to the next changes, really start with the zoning requirements, and this is section 9. So we try to provide clarity in this ordinance such that we made it clear that where you might normally have a requirement, if it didn't exist, that we affirmatively stated there is no requirement. So in the original ordinance that was put up, we didn't have lot area, not applicable, lot depth, not applicable, lot width, not applicable, and lot frontage, not applicable. Because this is part of the existing Princeton Community Village, there's no thought about subdivision or more development going on there. So it's really one track. So those don't apply. So the current draft for introduction should have those in there saying that they're not applicable. With respect to the number D under 9, maximum impervious coverage is listed at 65%. However, in order to ensure that there was not a conflict with an existing section of the ordinance, which required maximum impervious coverage based on lot size, we had to specifically say that section 10B-246.1 does not apply, because we're creating a standard here, so we don't want it to be confused with the general standard. That's the change. Off-street parking requirements. We went from 1.3 to 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit to be consistent with another of our ordinances. And we also added a requirement that said that the minimum parking space size is 9 feet in width by 18 feet in depth.
Michael, it's 1.5 to 1.3, not 1.3 to 1.5, right?
It's 1.5.
It had been 1.3. We changed it to 1.5 at Ed's request.
Yes.
Okay, well, I just want to register that I'm not pleased with that. And I thought that we had agreed that it would be 1.3. And I think it's unfortunate that I think it's a problem that some of our other affordable housing areas are 1.1. And my understanding was that PCH was okay with 1.3.
I mean, I can speak to this a little bit. I think unfortunately, there's an existing problem right there, right now. Because, most of the times you have more than one person who's living per household who's working. And it's, a lot of people, most people need a car to get to work. Plus there's an additional problem where sometimes people will have their grown kids come back and they're working. And, I think this is a longer term thing of trying to link the housing to jobs that are in town. But if that is not the situation right now, you're creating a real problem for people. And I think
free to build, they're free to build more. I mean, we're not restricting
oh, I
them,
see.
but we wanted to be consistent because everywhere else we're doing 1.1 or 1.3. And my understanding as late as this afternoon is that they were fine with us putting 1.3 so that we're consistent. So all of our affordable housing, all of our new developments, period, including Nassau Street. 1.5 is a standard that we do not have. We are not using it anywhere in Princeton right now. And I heard from both the head of PCH and from Mr. Truselli that they were fine with 1.3.
Okay, well, they're, I think they're both on the call here. So if they want to comment, they can. Yeah, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I do want to correct Ms. Sachs. We have ordinances both at Thanet and the one for the shopping center, which have 1.5 in as the standard per dwelling unit. So it's really not as consistent as you're representing it to be. I do think we want to ask Mr. Truselli to talk to these issues, and there were some that I as well had concerns about, things they had requested. Specifically waivers
Did he
from
send you something?
standards such as not building on steep slopes.
I don't even know what he sent you.
Yeah, so Ed, I see that your hand is raised, but I don't control. If you can just write it in the Q&A. I don't, unless Mark,
He needs to be brought over as a.
Okay, Mark, are you able to bring Ed over? You might have lost Mark for a second.
Yeah, he's trying to
Here.
deal with. Okay.
Okay, are you able to, so Ed Truselli is on, can you bring him on as a panelist so that?
Sure.
he can
Let me
speak?
find him on the attendees. Should be coming over.
Okay. I see you.
The box is up.
Yeah.
It was unmuted.
There we go.
Hi, good evening. This is Ed Truselli. Can you all hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Yes, to respond to the question about the parking, we did request 1.5 for a couple of reasons. Unlike some of the newer developments, Princeton Community Village is a mature community. It's been in operation for nearly 50 years. There are 3 and 4 bedroom units there existing, and then we're going to be providing in the proposed new addition multi-bedroom units as well. Parking has historically been an issue there. Just 3 years ago, we came into the planning board for an additional 25 parking spaces. So this is an effort to address a problem in the most efficient and effective way without, again, trying to be too aggressive with it. It is a need up there, and we have met with residents many times since I've been with PCH, and that has been a very big concern of existing residents.
And if I can ask a follow-up, Ed, you and I talked this afternoon as well about the waivers from site design standards relating to building on steep slopes or having islands in parking areas, planting replacement trees for trees that are cut down. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about why those things are important.
Sure. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. As I related to you this afternoon, we had an opportunity to meet with municipal staff, planner Michael Laplace, Jack West, and Derek Bridger back in December of last year when we presented a layout plan and we reviewed it with them. And part of the issues that were raised were the three that you just mentioned by our civil engineer. In terms of steep slopes, it's really not a question of us building on steep slopes, but the engineer has a concern about the proposed location of the new building, which would inadvertently create a steep slope as in a strict reading of the ordinance. So he was concerned about that, and we asked for that relief in the ordinance to accommodate that. The parking islands is another area where we're requesting relief there because as big a site as PCV is, there are quite a few limitations on the area that's available to build not only buildings, but parking. There are many, many trees on the site already. There's a huge natural gas easement. There's a lot of slopes that are not buildable. And the location of the building is such that we're not going to be really removing very many trees. But if we do add some parking, we may be removing some trees. In the past, when we had our additional 25 units added, we did seek from the planning board relief on the tree preservation requirement. And we were approved for that because we wanted to have the opportunity to be efficient with our costs and also devote the money instead to developing and building affordable housing, which is much needed. I think the last issue was the parking islands. And again, this relates back to the idea that there is a limited amount of area on the site, again, despite how big it is. And we are just trying again to be efficient so that we can provide the necessary amount of parking in as efficient a way possible.
Thank you. I think it'd be helpful if you just kept your box on till
Sure.
we're done with this ordinance in case more questions come up.
you.
Michael Sullivan, were you done with?
Well, I think Ed got to it in terms of the last two things or last three things were the exemption from the section on the trees, 10B-227A-D. And then the grading, which is exemption from 10B-254.1. And then we specifically permitted LED luminaires within the development.
Okay, great, thank you. And wanted to give Mr. Cohen, Ms. Sachs, or Ms. Pearl-Lambros a moment if they wanted to comment any further on this, or if there's any other questions or comments from council. Mr. Cohen, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment particularly in regard to the tree replacement. We did also give relief on the tree replacement to the senior project on the Thanet site. So it seems like an appropriate even-handed thing to do for PCH as well.
Anybody else? Okay. And I don't know if there's any public comment on this one. Oh, it looks like we're still working on getting it up on the website. Well, I feel like at this point we have the base of it up on the website and we've reviewed the changes. I would have preferred that the actual draft were up there.
I actually heard from Dolores about 2 minutes ago asking which one to put up. So it may be that it's there, but
Okay.
if it's there, it's only been there for about 3 seconds.
Yeah, okay. Well, I will say that we will get the corrected version up. And it'll definitely be there for people to review before the public hearing on the 13th.
Can I just ask real quick of the documents that you sent David, there's draft B and just draft. Are we focusing on draft B?
The
No.
other one, just
The other
draft.
one, just draft. Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I'd just like to ask members of council if people, I don't want to push people to vote on something here that there's any confusion about. So I think that Michael Sullivan went through the changes. I just, if anybody has any questions, or let's just make sure we get it all out at this point. Yeah, Mr. Williamson?
I was just going to say I'm comfortable with the way that Michael laid out the changes and Ed chimed in on that.
Okay. Okay, so I don't see any other comments coming in. So is there a motion to introduce? Mr. Cohen and seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Any final discussion? Okay, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes,
Mr. Cohen,
Yes,
Ms. Fraga,
Yes,
Mr. Williamson. Mr. Williamson, I can hear you.
Yes.
Oh, Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, so this ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on July 13th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-21, an ordinance to amend and supplement Chapter 10B of the Princeton Code entitled Land Use and the Princeton zoning map to create an AH05 affordable housing overlay zone and the regulations associated thereto in the municipality of Princeton. And this ordinance refers to changes to the zoning at the Princeton Shopping Center. And again, we can have Michael Sullivan walk us through the main provisions of this ordinance.
Okay. This is an overlay district which is coterminous with the existing shopping center district, and it provides for, in accordance with the settlement agreement, the construction or development of up to 200 dwelling units, which will generate at least 44 affordable housing credits through the mechanism of an inclusionary overlay ordinance. This is not a municipally sponsored ordinance. It contains affordability provisions and marketing provisions that are standard to any of the affordable housing ordinances that we've built for you. It provides for the only permitted use within this overlay district is multifamily residential for rent dwelling units. It provides for a series of accessory uses that are consistent with the other affordable housing districts as well. And it contains site development standards that are reflective of a conceptual development plan that is also attached as illustrative commentary to provide a benchmark or a touchstone for how this development should occur within a certain portion of the district that is meant to integrate with the existing shopping center district and possible future development of the shopping center district. That in its simplest form, that's what it is. It allows up to 65 feet of building height, and it permits the development of I'm sorry, I get a little confused because the shopping center district amendments are really the companion piece to this, and there's portions of that that are relevant too. But essentially that's it. It allows for multifamily building development in associating with the shopping center with a comprehensive plan in accordance or substantially consistent with the concept plan that is attached.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Cohen?
and again, in our last minute scramble to get things straight, I want to mention that we received from the developer an updated site sketch for this late this afternoon. It is entirely the same in regards to the residential development, but has a slightly different traffic pattern for the pad building. The Walgreens pharmacy is going to be relocated as part of this project because it's currently located where the residential is going. So they're going to be sort of in a mirror position to where the PNC Bank is, but on the south side of the shopping center. So this new sketch, I think it's, very minor change. We'll make it available on the website as well. And hopefully can just be a minor change without having to reintroduce the ordinance. There were also a couple of requested changes to the language, which I'm going to just read through. Again, I think they're all minor. We don't have to incorporate them before introduction, although since we have the language, maybe we can just do it on the fly. In section 8, under the permitted accessory uses, they would like to add language to item E, saying that street parking and loading, including garage parking, is a permitted accessory use. And that's been in the plan all the time. It's just a clarification.
Just if I could raise my hand on this,
Sure.
Am I doing it right?
Yes,
Yes.
perfect.
Just in terms of language, we use the term parking structure throughout the ordinance and in the SC. So the idea that we would say structure, not necessarily garage, I just think to keep it consistent. Would that be fine?
Absolutely. They requested that dog parks and/or runs and pet washing stations for the exclusive use of the tenant residence should be added as a permitted accessory use. And they requested that for item M, they wanted to replace item M with this language. Accessory uses customarily incidental to permitted principal uses, including but not limited to maintenance, trash, and recycling facilities.
So just on that, I would also, include and subordinate too, not just incidental.
Great,
That follows the statute, and I think that that's important.
great. In section 9, there's a density of 7 dwelling units per acre, and there's an overall density of 200 residential units. They didn't feel like both of those were necessary.
So my only comment is, one of the things that we really try to do is follow the settlement language as closely as possible. The settlement language had just under 7 dwelling units per acre as a density. So I rounded it up to 7, just to make sure we didn't have a problem with that. If it doesn't affect them, I'd suggest we leave it in just so that when we get to the point of a compliance hearing, we say, yeah, we put in for 7 and it's 200 units. I know it's redundant, but.
Yeah, sounds good. And then they're saying there's no mention of an impervious coverage percentage of 95%, which they had requested. I don't believe the township has impervious coverage limits for commercial. I know that we talked about this already this evening in the public hearing, where there was an exception for the impervious coverage limits for residential uses. I think it was the AH.
It was Heidi's
AH4.
comment, I think, wasn't it?
No. It
Oh.
was something where we actually, not the introduction, but we had the hearing. And I was puzzled why that was necessary, but it is true that the ordinance has impervious coverage limits for residential,
That's right.
for commercial. So I guess this is relevant in this case as well, since this is a residential overlay. Michael, do you think it makes sense to add this as
I do think it makes sense, particularly because you would have conflicting provisions that would significantly limit development in this zone if we didn't exempt it from those, or actually create its own standard, like
okay,
we did with AH4, create a standard and say, yes, and you're exempt from these other residential requirements, which is a table.
great, okay. And then the last comment, and this is a little bit more complicated than all of the other ones. We've had some discussion around this before. They've requested an language that would permit them to have a lot that doesn't front on a street. And the reason for this is that as part of the site plan application, they will be coming with a subdivision to create a lot that doesn't front on a street. Looks like Michael has figured out a solution.
Well, it's a lot simpler than you think, David.
Okay,
You can't do it, right? So the statute requires this. You cannot, and I'll let Trishka weigh in, but you can't have a local ordinance, zoning ordinance, tell you that you don't have to comply with the statute. So they're gonna need relief from this, but it's an understanding that we've got a concept plan, and there's gonna have to be an understanding about it. There's really, unless they actually, and we talked about this, they could get around it by creating some crazy, flag lot shape if they really wanted to. They're gonna be able to provide more than sufficient emergency access all around this use. And so there's really no reason why that relief shouldn't be granted. And because it would be granted in association with a site plan, the planning board would have jurisdiction, not the Board of Adjustment, as it would if it were an isolated lot that was out somewhere
okay.
without a site plan. So Trishka, tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're right.
Okay.
What he said.
Okay. That's it. I've exhausted the items on the email.
Okay, that was good. There was a question that came in from Valerie Haynes. Can you explain the color code on the concept drawing? In particular, what is the large gray area in between the new blue structures?
I can. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, you go ahead.
I'm sorry. The gray area in between the blue structures is the parking structure. That's actually the parking deck wrapped with the blue residential. But recognizing that this concept plan will be replaced with the current one, it may not look exactly like this, but the residential, it will show the parking structure. It will show the homes around it, and it will identify the non-residential buildings around it as well.
Okay. This is very strange. There's somebody named FD, but it's timestamped 3:48 a.m. So I'm not sure if this is a ghost comment or what it is, but it says, does the public get to ask questions today? And I would say, if you have a question, you can ask it. If it's pertinent, they'll make sure it goes. Okay, so if you have a question, you can ask it if it's pertaining to this ordinance. And I just want to see if there's any other questions from council. No.
And I'll just mention, people will have an opportunity to ask questions again at the public hearing on the 13th.
Right, exactly.
Feel like it's your last opportunity.
Right. So I'm just going to give Frank D another second here. But if
Mayor, he did type a second comment, but I think you may need to clarify. I think he may be asking if he gets to speak, which is not workable.
Right.
So maybe you need
can't-
to clarify, he can,
Okay.
is welcome to submit his comment
Thank you.
in the
All right.
Q&A. Yeah, because he
Right.
did make a second comment. You can look at that.
Okay, yes. So you can, if you want to ask a question, you can ask the question by typing it into the Q&A or by sending an email to
there is-
princetoncommons@gmail.com.
There is a question there now that you could read.
Okay. Did
Just
you
not mention
do
that.
a traffic study? 200 units, could be 400 more cars on Harrison, etc. How is this site chosen? Respectfully, Frank. I don't know if anybody wants to take a stab at answering that one.
What I will try just a little bit.
Okay.
One of the things, some of the issues in terms of the traffic study, these will be all part of a site, part of the site plan will deal with the issues of traffic once there's development. This is just the ordinance that puts the zoning in place at this time.
Right. And then I can answer the larger question about how the site was chosen. So Princeton has been working on an affordable housing plan for several years now. And we worked to put together a plan that was based on good smart growth principles. And that means building housing that's within easy distance of jobs, of services, shopping, and transit. The shopping center, building housing at the shopping center is really the epitome of smart growth in a lot of ways. We're hoping that having housing there is going to not just create a very livable environment for the people who are in those apartments, but also help the businesses at the shopping center because there'll be customers living right there. And we are also hopeful that it provides, at least for some people, the ability to live car-free. Because if you have a job in town, maybe you can work at the center or be able to take a bus or walk into town, and your shopping is right there. And so that is why that site was chosen, because it seems like a really smart place to build housing. And as we're thinking about growth for the community, oftentimes when people think about walkability, they are fixated on walkability to Nassau Street in the downtown, but there's a limit to how much we can grow in and around the downtown. And so, the idea that there's going to be another center of energy around the shopping center area, I think you'll see in this plan. And there might be likely another center of energy growing at the border with Montgomery, again, where there's more commercial areas and jobs popping up there. So I think it's just, we've been thinking about how do we position Princeton? How do we make sure that we're growing in a way that if we don't grow, our housing prices are going to be astronomical, and we become less and less diverse. So this is a way to, meet our housing obligations, and also do it in a way that benefits the community. And in terms of the impact on Harrison Street, clearly that's a concern. And I think that's one of the challenges with Princeton is that we don't have major thoroughfares really anywhere. But again, I think the hope is that this will be a place where people probably can live without investing in a car. Ms. Sachs?
We've been on such a roll with introducing ordinances. I've gotten a lot of questions, including now, about what the difference is in terms of protocol for the public between at the introduction and at the hearing. So I was hoping, I wanted to ask Trishka, our attorney, if she could just spend a couple moments explaining, tonight is just the introduction, not the hearing, and explaining to the public what is the appropriate behavior for tonight and versus next, I guess is it next? No, the 13th.
Sure. So the process that's laid out in the statutes for introducing and adopting ordinances, the introduction on first reading is sort of literally that. It's kind of floating the ordinance out there for public consumption and feedback, which then takes place at the public hearing, which is when the ordinance gets its second reading. And that is the time under the statutes that's set aside for members of the public to come out and tell the governing body what they think, any concerns that they have, positive or negative, before it's adopted. There's no statutory requirement to take comments or questions prior to an ordinance being introduced. Some towns don't. I think Princeton, since I've been representing the council, does take comments and answers questions even before an ordinance is introduced on first reading. There's certainly nothing improper about it as long as the statutory requirement of the public hearing is met. And that's really, in terms of the comments that are made, that's kind of when they quote unquote count, because that's when it becomes officially part of the record, is at the public hearing itself. So hopefully that laid it out in a way that you were looking for.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize for, because there have been a number of instances in which people came at the introduction or came as in,
virtually,
and made the time and the effort and thought that they were making their comment on the record. So I just want to make clear that next on the 13th is the official hearing where your comment counts on the record.
That's correct. Now they will be reflected in the minutes. I mean, we've had instances, where ordinances have gone to court, and we've looked not only at what was said at the public hearing, but even questions and comments that might have been made on introduction. So it's not for members of the public who are asking their questions and making their comments now. I don't want them to feel like it's a waste of time. But it's absolutely not the last bite of the apple either. The public hearing is really the main event. And then,
okay.
Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that too, that it's, this has been just the custom of the council. And I feel like having comments at this time is really helpful because it can at times help put an amendment in an ordinance if we need one, so that it saves time. And that has happened multiple, like countless times actually. And we want to hear from the public to make sure that we're creating ordinances that we hear voices from the community that are often really helpful in shaping the legislation. And sometimes we get asked questions that it gives us extra time so that we can prepare the answers so we have them at the time of the public hearing. Because I think it's extremely frustrating if you aren't able to answer important questions at that time. Ms. Niedergang?
Well said, Mayor.
Yes, I agree. I think Councilwoman Sachs' point and our legal counsel's answer are really important. I think that we lose sight of it because we're so used to the difference, but I think it's a really important point. And I'm wondering if it could be added to the agenda, just so somebody looking it over and trying to decide when they're going to attend or put the time in, that they have some guidance as to what that means, or somewhere where it would be obvious, where people would see it right up front.
Well, it is listed here. So whenever we have an ordinance introduction, in parentheses at the end of the title, it will have, so for example, at the end of the ordinance 2020-21 that we're discussing right now, it says public hearing July 13th, 2020.
Right, but that's assuming people know exactly what the difference is, which I really, I'm not in any way disparaging people. I don't think that I knew either a few years ago, but so I think just an explanation of that just if that's possible, just makes it a little more accessible. You kind of, as you said, you have 2 bites of the apple, but if you want to get in early, come to the introduction, but your last chance to weigh in when an ordinance may be revised would be at the public hearing.
Right. And then for these ordinances too, just if people are reading the newspapers so that they don't get confused, there's a public hearing on July 13th, but before that, there's a hearing at the planning board, and the planning board will review anytime there's a land use ordinance, the planning board will review it for consistency with the master plan. So I don't know when the next planning board meeting is where this will be discussed.
I believe it's the 9th.
July
Okay.
9th.
July 9th. So this will come up again on July 9th at the planning board. Ms. Pearl-Lambros, did you have a comment or question?
No, that's okay. I was just going to follow on to what your comments were, Mayor, about the location of this, and just wanted to mention how good it's going to be for the shopping center businesses and how smart it is of Edens to do this development there, particularly now that we're going to be coming in out of this crisis. I think the business community is going to need the help. So
Right.
that'll be good. Thank you.
And thanks. And then I just wanted to respond to just the timing so everybody's clear. So if this ordinance gets introduced tonight, it'll go to the planning board on July 9th. There'll be a public hearing back at council on July 13th where we will take a final vote. So the vote tonight is just to introduce the ordinance and start that process. The vote on July 13th, assuming that's when it will be whether to actually approve the ordinance or not. And then I had mentioned a August hearing. That's not a council meeting, that's actually a court hearing. And that's when Princeton will appear in court for our compliance hearing for our affordable housing, the whole entire 3rd round plan, to show that we've approved all of the ordinance that we said we would approve at the time of the fairness hearing, which was earlier this year. Hopefully that was clear. So are there any other comments or questions on this ordinance? And if not, is there a, yes, Ms. Brown-Lambros, a motion to introduce?
The motion.
Okay, moved by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Peron-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes, and I just want to clarify that it's moved and seconded per the modifications that I discussed with Michael Sullivan at the outset.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, so the amended ordinance has been introduced, and the public hearing for the ordinance will be on July 13th, 2020. Next, we come to resolutions. The first is 2218, resolution authorizing the expansion of certain outdoor dining areas on Palmer Square East in the municipal right-of-way. Oh, sorry, Michael, did you have a?
I think we have one more ordinance,
Yes,
do we
there's
not?
one more ordinance that was added.
2022, Mayor.
Oh, sorry. All right. So ordinance 2022, and I'm need to pull up, I printed out an older version of this. An ordinance to amend and supplement Chapter 10B of the Princeton Code entitled Land Use to modify minimum development bulk standards in the SC Shopping Center District and to provide standards for compact car parking in the SC District and the AHO-5 Affordable Housing Overlay District.
Correct. This is really a companion piece to the AHO5 because this deals with adjustments to the shopping center zone in order to accommodate the residential development within the AH05 overlay, but not unnecessarily burden the SC zone and any future development therein from setbacks and other things that would relate to the placement of the residential use within the zone. So this involves in section 1, we have an amendment to the bulk table from 10B-264, which identifies those changes. The changes that are additions, the new terms are in bold with an underline. The deletions are bold with a strike through. And it relates, there's a few of them in here in terms of setbacks and requirements relating to the adjacent residential zones. In section 2, it deals with the compact to parking development, and it deals with both surface lots and how they might deal with compact parking. And it also deals with structured parking and how that would deal with compact parking. Compact parking will be limited to 30% of the overall parking requirement. And then finally, there's in section E, and this is cut off in the draft that made it to you guys, and I apologize for that. The section under 10B-203 surface parking design standards E, which is both D and E are new sections or new provisions, subsections. Off-street parking for non-residential uses in the shopping center district would have a general requirement of 1 space for every 275 square feet of floor area. So those are the amendments, and it's, as I said, it's really a companion piece to the AH05.
Okay. Are there any questions from this from council or comments? Okay, and there was a question that came in, I think, just about the shopping center development in general, asking about the time for completion of the project. And that is sort of beyond the control of council. Really what our time frame is to have the zoning ordinances in place so that we can be ready for our compliance hearing. When it gets built is not dictated by the zoning. So in terms of what the council's responsibility is to create a realistic opportunity for this to be built. But there's no strict timeline on it. Mr. Cohen?
I just want to make the caveat that it should be before 2025.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Mr. Cohen and seconded by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. And if there's no other further comments, then Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
So the public hearing for this ordinance will also be on July 13th, 2020. It was unanimously introduced.
Thanks for your, this is Michael. Thanks for your help and assistance and attention tonight. I'm going to work with Mr. Cohen to make sure that these, the tweaks that we talked about tonight get incorporated into the ordinances and for the public hearing.
That'd be great.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night.
See you next
Thank you.
time.
Night.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we come to resolutions. 2020-18 resolution authorizing the expansion of certain outdoor dining areas on Palmer Square East in the municipal right-of-way. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Fragas or seconded by Ms. Lambros. Any questions on this one or comments? Nope. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2019 resolution approving the application by Shop the World to install a table and tent canopy on Hines Plaza to accommodate the outdoor sale and pickup of goods. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Lambros, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any comments or questions on this one? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. And now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature. Although this consent agenda only contains one item. And hopefully does anybody want to remove from the consent agenda? Everyone's okay with it on the consent
Hopefully not.
agenda? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Ms.
Second.
Mata, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. And is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you,
Good night.
everybody, and good
Thank
night.
you.
And hope to see most of you back on the 13th.
Thanks.
Good night.
Will do.
Good
Good
night.
Good
night.
night, everybody.